And join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, why on earth should any voter trust Angela Rayner again after the Labour deputy pushed Liberal media lies to try and bring down Boris over yawn Partygate? I'll break down the disturbing and dangerous fake news spreading about the lefty elite echo chamber in my digest next. Then I'll get the views of my superstar panel, the media personality and writer Christine Hamilton, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. With more than 4,500 migrants crossing the Channel already this year, and this month alone seeing arrivals triple compared to March 2021, is the UK at all committed to protecting our borders? Well, one man who certainly is, Nigel Farage, joins me on this at 9:30. As male patients are asked if they could be pregnant, has the NHS become totally consumed by wokery? Darren Grimes has been investigating, and he's tonight's Outsider at 10:20. Speaking of the NHS, should they start giving COVID jabs to healthy 5 to 11-year-olds next week? That's today's Clash, the part of the show where I want to get you involved. So email me, Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet at gbnews, and we've got a poll live for you right now as well. That debate coming up at 9:20. Should we be more concerned about wokeness going viral than we were about COVID-19? Well, Professor Gad Saad warns in his latest book of a, quote, pandemic of the human mind originating from our anti-liberty and anti-logic universities. Can't wait for this interview. He's uncancelled at 10:40. Should at-home abortions, where women are provided pills to terminate their pregnancy after a telephone consultation, be allowed? My panel are at loggerheads on this one, and they'll duke it out at 10. And are white critics of Will Smith's appalling Oscars slap downright racist and guilty of anti-blackness? We'll pull apart that latest nonsense example of lefty race baiting from The Guardian, no surprise. Plus, are you ready to take the highway to the danger zone?
What the hell? Good morning, aviators. This is your captain speaking.
Yep, after 36 years and hellish pandemic delays, Tom Cruise is back as Maverick in the brand new Top Gun 2. All of that and more to come in the media buzz throughout the 10 hour. Plus, I'll bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages as they land, and I'll crown a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. How good was it to see the Queen resplendent at 95 at the memorial service for Prince Philip today, in what some royal watchers have been privately speculating, and I hate to even say this or contemplate this, her last ever public appearance. So while I hope and pray that is not true, her quiet stoicism and dignity at today's service brought a little tear to my eye, I'm more than happy to admit. I'm not ready to let go of the second Elizabethan era, and the past few days, weeks and months shows the choppy waters our royal family will have to navigate without Her Majesty on the throne. Now, family politics was very much at play today too. The Queen made clear Prince Andrew remains her favourite son despite his disgrace over Virginia Giuffre, with the shamed Duke of York escorting his mother in and out of Westminster Abbey through an exit that allowed her a shorter walk to her seat. While I personally disagree with that decision, it says something about the Queen's loyalty to her family. But none of that loyalty was on display from her dastardly grandson, Prince Harry. Shame on him. And shame on Meghan Markle too, for being the only close family members to miss the memorial because of a pathetic and self-censored row with the government over security. Refusing to see the Queen at this time is a decision the Sussexes will come to rue in future years. It says much about them. My superstar panel are here shortly tonight. The media and, well, she's an all-round personality, isn't she? Christine Hamilton in the house on a Tuesday. Also here, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. But before all of that, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top stories, as you've been hearing, Her Majesty the Queen and other senior members of the royal family have paid tribute to the late Prince Philip at a special memorial service in London today. Her Majesty was accompanied by her son, Prince Andrew, who walked with her through Westminster Abbey. The service of thanksgiving featured elements the Duke of Edinburgh had planned himself for his funeral, but which hadn't been allowed due to coronavirus restrictions at the time. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says he's not convinced by Russia's claims that it's pursuing peace and is serious. He says the United States is instead focused on Russia's actions, not its words. That comes as Russia says it will drastically cut its military activity in Kyiv and Chernihiv in Ukraine to create the conditions, it says, needed for further talks. Negotiations in Turkey between Russian and Ukrainian officials had sparked hopes of progress towards ending the war. Meanwhile, several European countries, including Belgium, the Netherlands and Ireland, have all expelled dozens of Russian diplomats today. Ireland's asked 4 Russian officials and Belgium has asked 21 to leave their countries for not upholding standards of diplomatic behaviour and, in some cases, for alleged spying. Russia issued statements against the unfriendly actions and promised retaliation. The Israeli ambulance service says at least 5 people have been killed in a shooting on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Reports say the gunman has also been killed after opening fire first towards apartment balconies and then at people on a main street in a suburb called Bnei Brak. It's the latest in a string of attacks raising security concerns in Israel. Here, Downing Street has rejected P&O Ferry's claim that sacking 800 staff was necessary to protect the company. In a letter to the Transport Secretary, the Chief Executive said complying with the government's request to rehire the fired workers would cause the company's collapse. He told MSPs the minimum wage would be paid to workers if the law was changed.
The route that runs between Scotland and Northern Ireland as a domestic route, we are required to pay national minimum wage, and we do pay national minimum wage, and we will continue to pay national minimum wage. And if that were extended elsewhere, we will completely comply with it. And this has not been about rates of pay. This has been about a fundamentally different model.
Pete Hebblethwaite. Downing Street has insisted the Prime Minister didn't mislead Parliament when he told MPs no lockdown rules had been breached despite a police investigation finding the law had been broken. 20 fixed penalties are set to be issued for parties which were held during lockdown at Downing Street. The Metropolitan Police says they'll be referred to the Acro Criminal Office, which will be responsible for handing out the fines. A dozen events were investigated and the Prime Minister is thought to have attended as many as 6 of them. Scotland Yard says there could be more referrals in future. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now let's get back to Dan Wootton tonight.
And the cretins are back, forgetting that global security remains at risk thanks to a European war, and Britain has been plunged into the biggest cost of living crisis in a generation. The opposition have started obsessing over Partygate. And by opposition, I don't just mean Labour, the SNP and the Lib Dems. I mean the mainstream media too. The BBC, The Guardian, The Daily Mirror, ITV News, Sky News, Channel 4 News and many others in the MSM are conspiring to convince you that whether small-time government officials, most of whom are no longer in post, broke ludicrous lockdown rules in 2020 is again the world's biggest story. Now, for lack of any doubt, I'm going to repeat my long-held position that it was wrong for Number 10 officials to break the ludicrous rules they introduced, which were morally wrong to force anyone to follow. All of the COVID fines should be rescinded and the government should admit the law was an ass. But the politicising of this story is being led by the grasping, pathetic and frankly embarrassing Angela Rayner, who is now actually using blatant lies about Boris Johnson's international standing to call on the Prime Minister to quit. Look.
Once that trust and confidence has gone in the Prime Minister, then that damages us not only in this country, but internationally. We saw the pictures from NATO over the last couple of days where Boris Johnson was on his own and all the other world leaders were walking past him because they haven't got any trust and confidence in his abilities now because of the way in which he's acted. And therefore it damages us, not only in our democracy here, but it damages us abroad as well. And at serious times like this, there's more than willing, capable people that can take over. And I think Boris Johnson has proven he's not fit to be Prime Minister.
Sorry, I'm just imagining Angela Rayner being in any position of power and feeling a mix of despair and morality at such an absurd prospect. But this is Labour's deputy leader using blatant left-wing media lies to try and bring down the Prime Minister, which cannot simply be dismissed as ridiculous as she is. Boris Johnson has been the Western leader most trusted throughout the Ukraine crisis, far more than Biden or Scholz or Macron. Rayner, in that interview with ITV News, is referring to footage from last week's NATO summit, which has widely been used by the left-wing media, including, shamefully, the BBC, showing the PM appearing to look isolated during a meeting with fellow leaders.
Remarkably isolated, even as the Kremlin crowned him the most active anti-Russian leader.
Now, the use of that clip, shame on Sarah Smith at the BBC, by the way, for voicing a report using that clip, because it's not just a distortion, it's a downright lie. Because Boris had been warmly greeted first by the US president and all other major leaders. The opposite of isolated, I'm sure you'll all agree. Now, I didn't even bother to use any of those clips or talk about the BBC lies last week because it was just yet another smear from the biggest proponents of fake news in this country. But this lie is now being used by the Labour Party to call on the Prime Minister to leave his job at a time of international crisis. That is irresponsible. The echo chamber of the lefty media and the Labour Party is seeing fake news treated as fact. That's deeply disturbing. So can you trust Angela Rayner? Nope. Can you trust the Labour Party? Nope. Can you trust the BBC? Nope. So is Partygate the #1 story in the world, putting the future of the Prime Minister under threat? Nope, nope, nope. Ignore the cretins. To respond now, my superstar panel. The media personality and writer Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Calvin Robinson, I ignored the fact that the BBC used that clip last week, even though I thought it was a disgrace because I didn't want to draw attention to it. But you've now got Angela Rayner using that smear to say that the Prime Minister should resign. We've got to start calling this stuff out.
Yeah, but it's great to see you calling it out because this is what they do, isn't it? They don't lie, per se. They show a real event, but they manipulate events so that we only see a fraction of what actually happened. You're right, Boris Johnson was warmly welcomed by many world leaders. He was also the first person many world leaders went up to. That's quite significant.
Including Biden.
Exactly. At this point in the game, for Biden to go to our Prime Minister first and foremost makes a statement, and for the BBC to cut that out, to manipulate the facts in order to serve their purpose, is very political. It's a bias.
And of course, Christine, this was on the day that Boris Johnson had been called out by Russia for being the most Russian world leader, which is, you would imagine, something the BBC would want to support.
And he's been called out, if that's the right word, by Zelensky for being the most supportive of Ukraine. I can't take Angela Rayner seriously. Well, because she looks more and more to me like a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel with those sort of... She looks as though she's just come out of the doggy grooming parlour. And the idea of her with her hands on...
I'm glad you have gone there, Christine, and not me. You're allowed.
I shouldn't think so. I should think the Twitter article, I talk about her looks. I'm sorry, but I find it difficult not to think that when I see her, and I think how long she spent doing all that. But no, the idea of her with her levers, with her hands on the levers of power is absolutely terrifying. And it's subliminal what they do, as you say, Calvin. It's not a downright lie, but it's all there subliminally.
Yeah.
Rebecca Reid, would you concede that Angela Rayner made a big mistake today?
I think it was an odd choice because of all the things to go in on him for, something that happened quite a long time ago. And we all know what the British public are like. We can't stay cross. We get very cross for about 6 days and then we don't care anymore. Nobody's that bothered about Partygate anymore. Cost of living, people are furious. Why wouldn't you make that your main focus? The Labour Party is supposed to be the party of working class people and working people. This is the thing to get cross about. The fact that power bills are massively skyrocketing and they're trying to pretend that it's all because of Ukraine. That's why you're putting your emphasis. But to be going back to Partygate feels very lazy. I'm not sure that her hair or makeup has anything to do with it, Christine.
Of course it doesn't.
I would say I think we should really try not to reduce her to what she looks like. She's perfectly useless enough on her own for all sorts of other reasons.
Exactly. I'm not reducing her to what she looks like, but if I can, without wishing to continue the metaphor, the Labour Party, they are like a dog with a bone, and Partygate is a...
Yeah, well,
sorry, nothing to do with what I said earlier. Partygate is the bone that they've got hold of, and they still think there's a lot of meat on it.
I think you're right, because I think they saw that for a brief period of time people were so cross, and we were on this sofa talking about it, and there were people who vote Conservative, who like Boris Johnson, who were furious. I never really cared. I think
no, you didn't. You've been consistent on that.
I was never that good about following the rules, but I think if you were very, very good about the rules,
I think a lot of people still are furious about it.
But I think not in anywhere near to the same extent that they are about some other things, and I just feel like it's time to let this go.
Well, look, the point is as well, and this is what the Labour Party don't understand, Calvin, it's possible to be furious about something. I was very annoyed, mainly because I never believed in the rules, and I don't think the rules should be in place, and it makes me so angry that ordinary, hard-working Brits are having to pay these fines, which are a nonsense. But it's possible to be annoyed about something without believing that it should bring down a democratically elected Prime Minister.
Well, exactly. I was annoyed too because it said to me that the people making the rules didn't believe that they were effective or worked. They were pointless.
Which is true.
Exactly. But I don't think it should bring down a government. The reason I'm terrified of Angela Rayner, similar to yourself, not because of her looks.
Is it because her eyeliner's so good?
Nothing to do with her looks.
Sorry, I've started something.
I don't think she's wicked or malevolent in any way. I just think she's totally incompetent.
Yeah, she's useless.
Useless how hapless she is for someone like her.
She's like the British Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Someone who maybe goes down the left.
I don't think it's that. What worries me is that I think she genuinely truly hates Boris Johnson. I don't think it's like we are colleagues who respect each other and think differently. I think she truly hates them.
She used the S word, didn't she, at the last Labour
and you shouldn't
refused to apologise.
We are a good example. We sit on the same sofa every week and we disagree on pretty much everything. Admittedly, we're not trying to run the country.
Well, we're not coming
but
up.
You have to have a bit of respect for the people you work with, and it worries me. I think she is blinded by how deeply she hates them.
And she let that slip when she used the scum word.
Yeah.
I think
that makes me sad.
You're allowed to say scum.
Because there are a lot of people on the left who don't feel that way and who are able to work more cooperatively.
She's full of hatred, but the reason I wanted to call her out today is because you've got to be so careful now with social media and clips being taken out of context, and then they find themselves on the BBC 10 o'clock news. And I actually think it was a disgrace that the BBC used that clip out of context to try and show Boris Johnson isolated on the world stage, when, as you say, Christine, the opposite was true. And I think it's particularly disgraceful for that clip to then be legitimised by the BBC and Angela Rayner to feel confident enough to use it as the reason to call on Boris Johnson to resign. In my belief, it wasn't just a distortion, it was a downright lie. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robertson, Christine Hamilton, my superstar panel will be here all night. But also still to come, as bombshell figures reveal almost 5,000 migrants have already crossed the English Channel in small boats this year. Nigel Farage joins us for his reaction. But up next in The Clash, should the NHS start giving COVID jabs to healthy 5 to 11-year-olds from next week with the help of toys to distract them? Well, Professor Angus Dalgleish goes head-to-head with Dr. David Strain on this, and I want to know what you think too. It's obviously an issue which brings a lot of passion in our viewers. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet us using the handle @gbnews. We've got a poll running on this right now as well. Vote, and I'll bring you the results once we're back.
Hello again. This time last week it was all about blue skies and soaring temperatures, but the next few days are going to offer a big contrast. It is turning much colder with ice in places and even some snow. Here's the reason why this cold front is drifting southwards. It wiggles around a little bit, and that could provide a bit of snow, particularly during tomorrow evening. But it introduces the cold air everywhere by Thursday. Back to tonight, and the cold air is moving in across the northeast of Scotland, and with the snow showers here, that could cause a bit of disruption, ice and snow risks, so we do have a yellow warning in place. Rain spreading into parts of northern England and Northern Ireland. Behind that, the colder air, so a frost. It'll be a relatively mild night across the south. Temperatures about average as we start Wednesday here. And a dry, bright day for parts of the southwest. Certainly a brighter day compared to today with some sunshine, but dull and damp to start with for Northern Ireland, Northern England, as this zone of rain drifts south into the Midlands and East Anglia. Could be a bit of snow on the hills over northern parts of England. Certainly more snow showers coming into the far north, and the colder air has spread further south. So today in the teens in Belfast, tomorrow only 7 Celsius. We could again get into the teens in the southwest, some late showers here, but the biggest cause for concern is this zone of wet weather sinking south tomorrow evening. As the cold air hits that, we could easily see some snow, mostly over hills, but even to low levels, there could well be a covering over parts of the Midlands and southern England as we start Thursday. Quite a bit of uncertainty about that, but stay up to date with the forecast. As I say, you could wake up to a covering of snow across parts of the Midlands, southern England on Thursday morning. Still some wet weather here during the rush hour as well, taking a while before it clears away. A few wintry showers then across the east, a mixture of sleet, hail and some snow. Sunny spells further west during Thursday, but look at the numbers, single figures across the board and feeling a lot colder, particularly with that wind coming in from the North Sea.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Nigel Farage and Darren Grimes on the way, but now the clash. From next week, healthy young children who have almost no risk of dying from COVID will be offered their first vaccines for coronavirus with the help of toys to distract them from the needle. But is it right we should be jabbing fighting fit kids who have more chance of being hit by lightning than succumbing to the disease, especially when it's widely accepted that our vaccines do not stop transmission of the Omicron variant in particular? In fact, a study by New York State officials in America last month revealed Pfizer's vaccine just 12% effective in preventing Omicron in children aged 5 to 11, the group who will be offered their vaccines here from next week. Regardless of what the fabled science says, medics at NHS England say vaccine centres will go to extra lengths to make the experience as stress-free as possible for nervous little ones and their parents. That includes wheeling out boxes of toys to take their minds off what's happening. One centre in Derby raised eyebrows by turning the site into what doctors at NHS England have dubbed a vaccination town, with the whole building redesigned and painted to make it welcoming for children. But when the majority of our youngsters are not at risk of death or serious illness and jabbing kids isn't going to stop Granny getting it, what is the point? So what do you think? Should we be vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds to protect them against COVID with the help of toys to distract them? I want to know what you think on this, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews, or you can vote in our poll while you're there. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But first, doing battle on this tonight is Professor Angus Dalgleish, a top oncologist at St George's University of London. Also joining us, Dr David Strain, senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Angus Dalgleish, why are we vaccinating children at this stage of the pandemic when, as far as I can tell, COVID-19 is an endemic, given that it won't kill them? I just don't get it.
Well, I think it is absolute madness to even contemplate vaccinating these children. When you look at the death rate from the children up to now, there's about 3 in this age group, and they all had serious underlying conditions like leukemia. And the JCVI still have not responded to all the detailed questions my colleagues and I have put to them. As how can you possibly justify this when the most outrageous speculation says that if you vaccinate 5 million children in this range, you will save possibly between 0.5 and 3 admissions to intensive care? I mean, what madness is that? Because the side effects in these children is not known. They have a very strong immune response, but we do know that if they've had COVID before, they were more likely to have severe adverse effects to the vaccine. And 85% of this group are thought to have been infected and seen the virus before. So you're going to inflict them with something that will do them no good whatsoever, but is very likely to give them significant side effects. One of the immediate side effects, they're more likely to spend time off school than if they'd actually had the COVID in the first place, spreading it around. So I really do feel absolutely passionately it is madness, and I'd like to know what the justification is this, because we cannot get a clear message from any of the people who are forcing and pushing this ahead in the NHS. I can see no rationale for it at all.
Dr David Strain, do you see any rationale for this?
So first thing is I agree entirely with everything you said about the very low mortality from Omicron or any variant of COVID in children. I think we are all agreed on that. Vaccinating 5 million people, 5 million children will at most prevent 1 COVID death, at most prevent 4 children admissions to ITU. absolutely agreed on that. The bigger issue for the Omicron variant in children is the same reason why Omicron isn't causing such severe disease in adults. It doesn't affect the lungs as much, it affects the upper airways. And in children, their upper airways are about the thickness of a pencil. So they get inflammation on there that can cause quite significant illness, a bronchiolitis, that is causing hospitalizations. There have been more hospitalizations from Omicron than there had of the previous bits before it. So that is one consideration. There's also the risk of long COVID. About 9.2% of children develop long COVID, which is about twice as high.
The jury's out on long COVID, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, David, but I've seen studies which say long COVID in kids is just one big fantasy.
I would urge you to have a chat with some of the parents of children who are suffering with that. There are many support groups. By all means, get in touch with them. And the data from Sir Terence Stevenson says this is about twice as common in children with COVID than it is for other viral infections. That is another consideration. The third element is it does have a small impact on reducing spread. And I agree it's small. Actually, from having that vaccination, it reduces the risk of household spread by only 46%, which, it halves the risk of giving it to your granny. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We also have an advantage. They did this in the States about 6 months or so ago. So we now have the safety data from over 8.5 million children that have received the vaccination in the States. And in that position, from the 8,676,000 children who received it, there were only 14 adverse events. And actually, 2 of those were later adjudicated to would have happened anyway. So only 12 patients who had problems from this. So compared to the risk of reducing hospitalizations, keeping children at school, remembering that the same thing that makes Omicron less of a problem to adults is making it more of a problem to children. That's the justification. And that's why JCVI are coming down on this now. Remember, this has been licensed to use in the 5 to 11-year-olds since right back in September. But it's only now that we're seeing the impact of BA2
we don't
on
need
children.
Just when we don't need it, I would argue.
Now.
Well, not many. Not many. Professor Angus Dalgleish, I want to talk to you about myocarditis. It's, of course, one of the heart conditions that can be caused by the vaccine. And it seems like it particularly impacts children.
Well, it's
or young men.
Yes, it's a very major problem, particularly in young males under the age of 30, and around 18 there appears to be a peak. And it's a very serious condition. You would not want to inflict it on anybody. They say, oh, you get over it and you work your way out of it. But no, in a recent study, they've shown that 89% of people who've had myocarditis, pericarditis, have scars on the MRI of their heart. So they're going to be at risk from cardiac problems for the rest of their life. In Hong Kong, this was so obvious that young men were getting severe pericarditis and cardiac problems that they stopped it. They've banned the vaccine for young people. And I think we should do exactly the same here. Because remember, this is not a vaccine, just like the others, mumps and measles, etc. This is a messenger RNA vaccine, which we do not have a clue what the medium to long-term effects of this are. There are increasing reports with the boosters that it reduces the immune response. And I have just seen recent data showing if you give the new vaccine, of course they're making a new vaccine for Omicron, and you give it as a booster in a mouse model, it just boosts the response to the vaccines that have long since gone. It doesn't specifically see Omicron. So the whole concept of boosters and going against this virus and vaccinating children, I think, is completely and utterly... I despair at the potential damage this could cause to all these people long term.
A lot to pick up on there. David Strain, I want to start with you responding about the risk of myocarditis, which is a heart condition that particularly impacts young men and boys potentially too.
Yeah, I fully accept and the data from the States, those 12 cases of people that were sick after the 8,676,000, they were myocarditis. 8 of those did require hospitalisation. All of them have made a recovery. The report that Professor Dalgleish speaks to about the permanent damage you get from myocarditis and pericarditis is actually the myocarditis that you get from COVID itself. If you've got the genetic predisposition towards having myocarditis to the vaccine, that will be amplified by having it to COVID. So the population that you're talking about, this scarring tissue of the heart, is left in people post-COVID. He's right that the peak of that is in the 18-year-olds. Remember, we're giving a much lower dose of the vaccine to children. It's half the dose of the amount that's getting there. And the messenger RNA is something that we all naturally make all of the time. We all make mRNA. It doesn't enter the nucleus of the cell. It isn't incorporated into your DNA.
What about this point, David Strain? David Strain, can I just ask you this point that Angus has made about people who have already had COVID? So if you're talking about young people, Angus says it's about 85% of people who've already had COVID. And then you're vaccinating, then on top of that, despite the fact they already have natural immunity, Angus suggests this could play havoc with immune systems. Do you disagree?
So the Delta gives you no protection against Omicron. We're seeing that at the moment. We're getting people, our hospital staff at the moment are suffering majorly, many of whom have had, myself included, have had Alpha or Delta before. No protection against Omicron. The spike protein is massively different. If you're vaccinated on the background of previous Alpha or Delta, you may, well, actually, no, there's no may, you will feel as if you're having your second jab. We all know when we had our second jab, we had slightly more fevers, we were more likely to have a headache. These are natural responses to inflammation. That's not causing permanent damage. That's our body demonstrating how well our body is responding to things that are already there. Okay. I do want to come back on comments on Hong Kong. Yes,
okay, final word.
Did the vaccine. That's why so many people are dying at the moment in Hong Kong from the Omicron variant that we are protected against.
Final word to you, Angus Dalgleish.
My final word is I still think it is madness to vaccinate these children. You're giving them a vaccine that's going to increase their chances of getting infected. I mean, that's becoming very, very clear. And yet the only query I'm worried at, my main concern, is they're going to get side effects, if not now, later on in the future.
Okay.
Ones we just don't know about because we're not used to this technology. So please stop this programme. That's what I would plead.
OK, thank you so much. That was Professor Angus Dalgleish, oncologist of St George's University of London, and Dr David Strain, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Thank you both. So who do you agree with on this? Well, Andrew, via Twitter, writes to say anyone who wants a jab should be able to get a jab. People who don't want a jab shouldn't be forced to have one. It's not that hard. Via Debbie, what happened to just treating the elderly and most vulnerable? None of us know the long-term effects of these vaccinations. Leave the kids alone. And from Martin on email, there's no way my 8-year-old twins are being vaccinated. We as adults have the ability to choose whether or not we want it. Kids don't, plus they don't need it. And your verdict is now in. Just 7% of you agree that the NHS should start giving COVID jabs to healthy 5 to 11-year-olds from next week. 93% of you, an overwhelming margin against this programme. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for that feedback. Now, coming up, did the Queen make a mistake by putting Prince Andrew at the centre of Prince Philip's memorial service? Well, Royal Editor Robert Jobson was there this morning. He'll join us live. But next, are we in danger of ignoring security at home amid the humanitarian crisis on the continent? Nigel Farage reacts to bombshell figures revealing over 4,500 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. He's here straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. What the Farage time now, and breaking tonight, over 4,500 migrants have already crossed the English Channel to Britain in small boats this year, bombshell figures have revealed. Despite poor weather conditions, more than 1,000 of those migrants were intercepted in the past 2 days. The Minister for Justice and Tackling Illegal Migration, Tom Pursglove, described the rise in dangerous Channel crossings as unacceptable. Well, no sugar, Sherlock, as they say, and Nigel joins me now. Nigel, are we in danger of ignoring security at home amid the humanitarian crisis on the continent?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, you know, I've been calling this now for a couple of years. As you well know, I went out into the Channel, in May 2020, and I gave some very dire warnings. You know, I predicted that 2021 would be minimum 20,000. I upped that by March to 30,000. In the end, the final figure, the adjusted figure, was getting on for 30,000. We are looking now at something way, way bigger than that. We're looking now at the possibility of 60 to 100,000 people coming this year. They will be 90% young men, undocumented young males, at an increasing massive cost. The last estimate was it's costing 1.7 billion a year to look after this problem. I suspect that's the tip of the iceberg, and there is no prospect of any change whatsoever. And Tom Pursglove can call it unacceptable. Well, that's rather like Basil Fawlty, you know, agreeing with the diner that the waiter's no blooming good. It doesn't actually solve anything. I shouldn't really laugh because the whole thing's so serious.
No, I know.
And it's also a national security risk because there'd be wars in the Middle East. We've no idea who some of these young men, what they've been doing. Have they fought for ISIS? We literally have no idea. And let me tell you, even if Boris Johnson at the moment is appearing to be a lucky general in the sense that Ukraine has overtaken the whole Partygate scandal and, 20 fixed penalties given out today and we'll see what's to come. But believe you me, when I've been out with GB News on Farage at Large, going out round the red wall seats, the anger at what is going on here is quite extraordinary. And people are saying, look, the Council House waiting list is well over 1 million. Young people just aren't being given a fair shot. And this isn't going to go away. I mean, I predict by June or July, this will be the #1 domestic issue in British politics.
Isn't that the biggest frustration, though, Nigel? It feels like the government only truly cares about this issue when it's at the top of the news agenda.
Well, the government make comments and say things when it's at the top of the news agenda. And Boris Johnson says, yes, of course, we're going to sort it all out. I mean, this is the same Boris Johnson, by the way, who was mayor of London, proposed amnesties for all people who'd come to Britain illegally. I think in her heart, Priti Patel would like to do something about this, but she is rendered impotent by the Human Rights Act, by the incorporation of the European Convention on Human Rights into UK law. There's nothing she can do. Nobody ever gets deported anymore. There are some in our judiciary that tell us we shouldn't even call them illegals. We shouldn't even use the word illegal. Oh, and Dan, if you dare to suggest that it's an invasion, well, my goodness gracious me, you'll be in the most terrible trouble then. But what else can you call it? And believe you me, many people living on the Kent coast and in East Sussex too are concerned and scared by what is going on. And, you know, we hear, oh, the RAF have been called in, the Royal Navy have been called in, the Army have been called in, and we've got the lifeboats and we've got Border Force. All we're doing is acting as a taxi service for illegal criminal gangs who are making millions and millions of euros every single week through this trade. And every one of these people on that boat knows that once they get to the UK, they will be allowed to stay, given accommodation, given dental care, given health care. And frankly, this is the kind of issue that could cost the Conservatives the next election, and Boris needs to wake up. PDQ.
I know, but what's so frustrating is it's been 2 years and they still haven't woken up. That's what I just cannot get my head around. And Nigel, the increase in numbers, I mean, if we were talking scientifically, they would say this is an exponential increase. Now, presumably that's because the people smuggling gangs are getting slicker. They realise what a big business this is, and they're coming up with crafts that are able to better deal with the cold weather.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable that so many have come in the month of March. I mean, the sea temperature, you know, is down. It's around about 10 degrees C. I mean, if you go into water like that, you ain't lasting very long.
Yeah.
So it's much more tempting to come in September when, you know, it's going to be 17 or 18 degrees. And if anything went wrong, you've got actually a fighting chance of surviving for an hour or two. Look, you know, if it's 3,000 in the month of March, it's not difficult to see. It'll be 10 or 15,000 in the months from June onwards. That is what it's going to be if we get prolonged weather, and there's nothing being done to stop this. Nothing whatsoever. And even if the French do turn a few boats around, well, they just come back the next day. It's like there's a great big sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying everybody is welcome. And what a contrast. What a contrast this is to women and children fleeing with the war in Ukraine. You know, people genuinely fleeing in fear of their lives. We know who they are. They've got passports. They've got documentation. We can check them with Interpol registers and all the rest of it. And I think the British people are very fair, very decent in how they approach all of these things. And what's happening in the Channel is regarded by a majority as being an outrage. There are some who insist that this is racism of a kind. This country has no history of that. We are open and generous, but you know, we do not want to be ridden over roughshod. And as I repeat the point, we have no idea who any of these young men are. 90% young, undocumented males, and they pose a security threat to our nation.
Nigel, are you surprised by the way the Tory party are at war over this issue? There's very limited unity. I was watching your interview the other night with David Davis, who is, of course, very much against the concept of offshore processing, for example.
Well, I'm surprised that there's actually not more anger on the backbenches. I'm also surprised, just sort of shifting tack for a moment, Dan, I'm also surprised that Labour are incapable of making more of this. I mean, they've now become the party that's pro-business. They've now become the party that's low tax. I mean, Labour are sounding quite attractive in some ways. I mean, they probably don't mean it. But it's the inability of the globalist Labour Party, because there are so many in that party who think it should be a world without borders where we can all move freely everywhere. But Starmer has shown himself to be adaptable. And if he was to pick up on this issue, let me tell you, the red wall would go. So this is a big warning shot to Boris Johnson. I know, Boris, that your friends that you have dinner with in Number 10 and Notting Hill and rural Oxfordshire aren't concerned in the least about this, but your voters most certainly are.
Although, Nigel, there's an issue, isn't there, when you've got a Labour Party leader and a Labour Party deputy leader who are unable to say whether a woman can have a penis. Hardly electable in the red wall.
Well, I know. But despite that, Dan, just bear this in mind. The hard left have been expunged. They're calling for tax cuts. They're saying business needs more help. The Labour Party under Starmer isn't scary. I agree on the social issues. They're miles away from where the middle of the country is. But a Labour Party that isn't scary, after a long period of Conservative rule, I'm thinking 1997 in my head, Blair didn't scare people. The middle classes weren't scared of massive tax hikes. In fact, probably we should be more scared of Rishi Sunak's tax hikes than we should be of Labour's. So things are changing in British politics. And I think we should pay credit to Starmer. Despite the nonsenses, pay credit to Starmer. He's got rid of the hard left. They've gone. They're not there. They're not visible. They're not voluble. Can they? Can they grip this issue? It's going to be fascinating to see. It really is.
Do you not consider Rayner on the hard left of the Labour Party? Because I do, and I'm scared of her, if I'm honest. I'm scared of her being anywhere near power.
Yes, but, I must admit, when I've met her personally, I found her extremely aggressive. But you know what? Truth is, it's Rachel Reeves that will matter. It's Keir Starmer that will matter. Rayner will matter far, far less. Now, I didn't think particularly the Reeves performance in response to the spring statement was that good. But you know what? A lot of commentators did. And even Tory supporting newspapers weren't that vicious in terms of their attack on what she was saying. Because, even the Conservative newspapers know that the tax burden under a Conservative leadership has risen to the highest level since Clement Attlee was in office. They haven't lifted a finger to ease business regulation, which they could have done, given that we're now living in Brexit Britain. So all these things suggest to me that, even if short term, Boris Johnson's getting a bounce on Ukraine, because let's face it, he has been decisive on that, much more decisive on that than he has been about almost anything else since he's been Prime Minister. And as I drive around the country, but the number of Ukrainian flags I see in little English villages, it's quite extraordinary. So that may help him in the short term. But at the end of the day, people will vote on the cost of living. They'll vote on whether their kids can get council houses. They'll vote on whether they can get GP appointments. In fact, many of the issues that made people vote Brexit are the same kind of issues they'll be thinking about at the next general election. And a massive influx of people illegally, and I insist on using that word, illegally coming into this country without permission, without documentation, all of that potentially puts the party in real trouble. And Patel is caught. I mean, she's probably the toughest Home Secretary in her own private thoughts on immigration of anybody. Maybe what she needs to do is to resign, stand up and resign on a point of principle and explain to the country that all the while we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights, there is literally nothing we can do.
Nigel Farage, fascinating analysis there, and I think a stark warning to the Tory party. I really hope Boris and Priti take heed. Nigel, thank you so much. And of course, Nigel back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. here on GB News. But coming up, should at-home abortions where women are provided pills to terminate their pregnancy after a telephone consultation be allowed? My superstar panel return to debate that in our media buzz. But next, did the Queen make a mistake by putting Prince Andrew at the centre of Prince Philip's memorial service today? I'll ask a man who was there at Westminster Abbey, royal author Robert Jobson. He's in Crown Jewels up next.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs, sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. It's time for Crown Jewels now with Robert Jobson. Now, as I said earlier, it was amazing to see the lovely Queen today. She attended her beloved Philip's memorial service, but family politics still very much at the forefront in a shock move. The disgraced royal outcast, Prince Andrew, appeared on her arm, and not surprisingly, lots of folk went into a meltdown. Just take a listen to how they talk about a grieving widow and our head of state. So, journalist Leah McGrath Goodman, she's part of this left-wing liberal elite, tweeted, "If the Queen was your neighbour, you would avoid her and look Look at how she continues to prop up her 62-year-old son, Prince Andrew, shrugging off his warm friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and bailing him out after accusations of sexual assault of a minor. You would not bow." And how about this from the lefty journalist Will Black? "The Queen is worse than Dot Cotton for supporting her sinister son despite his atrocious acts. Prince Andrew has zero shame. If he had any decency, he'd realise that hanging around his mum is damaging to her, the monarchy, and to how Britain is viewed internationally." Well, royal author Robert Jobson, he was the one earlier today to break the story about the Queen and Prince Andrew. So, Jobber, you've seen the reaction there. I got massive pushback today when I said, even though I disagree with the Queen's decision, I think it shows her loyalty to family. So do you think, in hindsight, she made a mistake by putting Prince Andrew at the centre of Philip's memorial service?
Well, hi, Dan. Yeah, I broke the story on GB News. And the reality is, I think clearly, whatever the decision, it was a conscious decision. That was the point. The Queen had thought about it, and I think there had been some disquiet about it amongst the family. They certainly knew that there would be some issues with this, but she was insistent. Now, it made some sense. He was without his partner. The other people were with their partners, and so Charles with Camilla, and with Commander Admiral Lawrence, etc. So he was the one that she wanted to be with her, and it was her decision. My feeling is also that sometimes there'll be some people, yes, that are very vocal against Prince Andrew, and we must again, although accusations have been made against him, as we said, there's nothing proven against him. Accusations were made against him. The fact is, she made that decision, and I think that there'll be some people thinking, well, okay, if the Queen is supporting him, that's okay with me. So it's difficult, really. I personally think it was a dangerous decision, but it was one that she wanted and clearly made consciously.
Well, indeed, she did. And Jobbo, some people don't agree with the position that I have when it comes to the Queen, but I will give her the benefit of the doubt on this. I will. I don't agree with the decision, but at 95 years old, if she wants to have Prince Andrew by her side, let's be honest, we know he remains her favourite son. I'm going to give her a pass on that. Let me tell you who I won't give a pass, though, Jobbo. Prince Harry and Meghan. I thought it was a disgrace that they weren't at this memorial service today because of some petty and pathetic row over security with the British government. They will rue that decision when they look back at their lives and think they had a chance to say a proper goodbye to Harry's grandfather and also spend some really important time with the Queen, who, let's be honest, Jobbo, her health isn't what it once was.
Well, she's never met, one of the children, and I think that whether Meghan ever ruined the day, I think Meghan was very much fleeting, in and out, barely really knows anybody in the family. She was only there for a short space. Prince Harry had one of the closest relationships with his grandfather. They really got on well. They were both servicemen, and they were really close to each other. He will undoubtedly regret that decision. He will look back in time and think that was a mistake, because you only get one opportunity to say a proper farewell to your grandparents. And when your grandfather has been a great figure like the Duke of Edinburgh, I really think it was it's sad. But there were some amazing moments, Dan, in that service. I mean, I know we can focus on Andrew, but I can tell you as a great royalist that when the
because you were there, Jobbo. You were there in the room.
Yeah, the singing of God Save the Queen certainly had an extra gusto in it. And the way that she arrived, I think when we were all singing Hear You Valiant Be and to be a pilgrim with John Bunyan's words, she does inspire, I think, so many people. But for me, the moment when the gold winner, forgive me, I can't remember the pronounce, I think Bari, her name was, who's the gold winner of the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, stood up. There she was, an ordinary girl, and she stood up and she described what the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme had done for her and changed her life for the better. Well, I found it very emotional.
That was a beautiful speech, it was. And I agree with you. That national anthem today, Jobbo, it felt more significant. It felt really like there was the weight of history behind it. We know we might not see the Queen publicly that much, and if that's one of the last times we see her, my goodness.
But the thing with everything aside, Dan, everything aside, the Queen, Andrew, all these things. I mean, the Duke of Edinburgh. I was thinking about him a lot because I wrote a book on him and I got to know him as well as the president of my club in London. And he used to say, "Life is going to go after me if I can make it marginally more tolerable for people who come afterwards, or even at the time, I'd be delighted." Well, he certainly achieved that.
Great tribute, Jobbo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, Boris Johnson has warned Putin should be judged by his actions, not his words, after Russia said it intended to drastically reduce hostilities around the Kiev and Chernihiv regions to help de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine has reportedly pledged neutrality and a 15-year consultation period over the sovereignty of Crimea in an attempt to strike a peace deal. You'll get a first look at how the newspaper front page is covering this breaking development on the crisis throughout the next hour. Elsewhere on the show, as men start being asked if they could be pregnant before medical procedures, are the NHS putting identity politics over patient welfare? Well, Darren Grimes investigates the insanity infiltrating our health service in The Outsider at 10:20. As wokeness escapes university campuses and infects the globe, is a pandemic of political correctness the next big threat to society? Well, Professor Gad Saad rails against the so-called justice warriors threatening free speech. He's uncancelled at 10:40. Should at-home abortions, where women receive pills to terminate their pregnancy after a telephone consultation, be allowed? And was it downright racist for white people to be outraged at Will Smith physically assaulting another black man at the Oscars? That's the bonkers view of some race-baiting lefties working for The Guardian. Well, my superstar panel will return to weigh in on both those topics and more throughout the next hour. Tonight, the media personality Christine Hamilton is here alongside the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Plus, do you feel the need for speed?
Having any fun yet?
And it was the young royals who stole the show today as they paid respects to the late Duke of Edinburgh. So we'll take a look at both those big pop culture developments in the media buzz too. And as ever, brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass revealed just before the end of the show. So do stay out with us this next hour. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top stories tonight. As you've been hearing, Her Majesty the Queen and other senior members of the royal family have paid tribute to the late Prince Philip at a special memorial service in London today. Her Majesty was accompanied by her son Prince Andrew, who walked with her through Westminster Abbey. The service of thanksgiving featured elements the Duke of Edinburgh had planned himself for his funeral, which hadn't been allowed due to coronavirus restrictions in place at the time. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is not convinced Russia's claims of pursuing peace are serious. He says the United States is focused on Russia's actions, not its words. That comes as Russia says it'll drastically cut its military activity in Kiev and Chernihiv in Ukraine to create the conditions needed for further talks. Negotiations in Turkey between Russian and Ukrainian officials had sparked hopes of progress towards ending the war. Meanwhile, several European Union countries, including Belgium, the Netherlands and Ireland, have all expelled dozens of Russian diplomats today. Ireland's asked 4 of its Russian officials and Belgium has asked 21 to leave their countries for not upholding standards of diplomatic behaviour and, in some cases, for spying. Russia issued statements against the unfriendly actions and promised retaliation. The Israeli ambulance service says at least 5 people have been killed in a shooting on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Reports say the gunman has also been killed after opening fire first towards apartment balconies, then at people on a main street in the suburb of Bnei Brak. It's the latest in a string of attacks raising security concerns in Israel's. Downing Street has rejected P&O Ferries' claim that sacking 800 staff was necessary to protect the company. In a letter to the Transport Secretary, the Chief Executive said complying with the government's request to rehire the fired workers would cause the company's collapse. He told MSPs the minimum wage would be paid to all workers if the law said so.
The route that runs between Scotland and Northern Ireland as a domestic route, we are required to pay national minimum wage, and we do pay national minimum wage, and we will continue to pay national minimum wage. And if that were extended elsewhere, we will completely comply with it. And this has not been about rates of pay. This has been about a fundamentally different model.
Peter Hepplethwaite. Downing Street has insisted the Prime Minister didn't mislead Parliament when he told MPs no lockdown rules had been breached, despite a police investigation finding the law had been broken. 20 fixed penalties are set to be issued for parties which were held during lockdown in Downing Street. The Metropolitan Police says they'll be referred now to the Acro Criminal Office, which will be responsible for handing out the fines. A dozen events were investigated and the Prime Minister's thought of attended as many as 6 of those. Scotland Yard says there could be more referrals too in the future. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, both dominated by the news out of Ukraine today. So let's start with the Daily Telegraph, which leads with a day of high emotion. Well, as the Queen attended, in terms of the picture, her late husband, Duke of Edinburgh's memorial service at Westminster Abbey, plus the Met Police are being accused by Nazir Afzal, the former chief prosecutor for North West England, of hiding behind rules by not identifying Partygate offenders. But the lead story of that newspaper, Russians give up on the conquest of Kiev. Vladimir Putin has failed in his plan to capture the capital city, as Moscow yesterday pledged to withdraw forces from the Ukrainian capital. And also leading on that story, the Metro, it's Russian roulette, they declare, and the paper reports hopes in Ukraine have been boosted after Russia vowed to scale back its military action. Ukraine's President Zelensky has suggested he could agree to a declaration of neutrality in exchange for peace, giving up any hope of Ukraine joining NATO. My superstar panel, back with me now, the media personality and writer Christine Hamilton is here tonight, alongside the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, 3 Tory MPs are desperately urging colleagues to stand with them tomorrow in a crunch vote on whether to allow at-home medical abortions. Driven by the pandemic, the government allowed a new system called telemedicine, where abortion pills were sent via post, meaning women could take the pills up to 10 weeks into their pregnancy without visiting a clinic. The temporary service was extended by 6 months in February, but peers moved to make the service permanent in England with a free vote in Parliament tomorrow. Elsewhere, the Welsh Government has already acted to make it law, while Scotland is holding a consultation. Well, the highly contentious issue is splitting opinion in Tory ranks, with MPs Sir Peter Bottomley, Caroline Noakes and Crispin Blunt leading the charge for it to stay, saying removing the service would be a grave misjudgment, while other MP colleagues remain worried about the safety of the service. So, to my superstar panel, this is a tough and sensitive issue. Rebecca Reid, I know you feel very passionate about the fact that at-home abortion should be allowed to stay. Why?
So I do, because following a miscarriage in 2019, I took the medication that is given to induce abortion because my body wasn't inducing abortion on its own. So I've taken this medication myself, and I know I'm very fortunate because I live very close to the hospital. So by the time sorry to be a little bit graphic, and if anybody is not squeamish, this is maybe not the thing to listen to, but by the time my cervix was opening and I was asking to pass a pregnancy, I could get home. That can happen incredibly quickly. So one of the really important things about this medication, one of the important things about this discussion, is that if you don't live close to a medical provider, this enables you to have your abortion or miscarriage in the privacy of your own home. It's also really, really important to remember that this isn't going from having your medical abortion in a hospital for the whole thing to all being at home. The way that it happens is you go to a clinic, you are scanned, you are assessed, and then you take the medication and you go home. So it's not like you were under medical supervision before. That hasn't changed. You always miscarried or had the abortion at home. It's just that you had a checkup beforehand. That's what's gone. I fully accept that some things have not been ideal in the rollout of this. There have been a very, very small number, but a real number of people who have been not diagnosed with an ectopic pregnancy, which would have been caught on a scan. That is problematic, but I think we have to not let perfect be the enemy of good when we talk about this medication, which generally speaking has been a force for good for women.
So that's an argument for it, but Calvin Robinson, you don't think this at-home abortion medication should be allowed?
No, and I can understand a lot of the medical arguments that Rebecca makes, but the word good is not a term I would use in this conversation at all. There's nothing good about this. Taking medical professionals away from the situation when you're going to have a medical procedure, in effect. If it wasn't safe before COVID, I don't understand why it's suddenly safe now, post-COVID, because it's not just about due diligence, it's about support. It's about support for the woman in the moment, but it's about aftercare, but it's also about what if something goes wrong. We're talking about not just physical, but psychological and other aspects such as coercion. What if someone at home is coercing someone to take this abortion pill that they don't necessarily want to take? Or what if someone's applying for this pill for someone else to take? There are so many different aspects and elements to it that muddy the water, make it a very dangerous and very worrying ground. I don't think abortion should be a thing at all. I think there should always be other options. But if we're looking at whether to make abortion something that people can do by themselves at home, I'm trying to not use the word DIY because
well, it is DIY, but it is anyway.
There has to be a better way. There's always a better way. I don't think this is right.
Christine Hamilton,
well,
who are you with on this?
I'm in the middle. The very word DIY conjures up all those horrendous images of backstreet abortions, etc. It's the word. It's not 100% DIY. I find it very worrying if somebody can just, as it were, ring up the doctor and say, "I want the pills by post, please." I would feel more comfortable if every woman had to go to a clinic and see somebody first. I'm not totally against them. The medical profession seems to be in favour of them, and apparently, I find this rather extraordinary, apparently about half of all abortions are now delivered by telemedicine, which I am astonished at. It does mean that abortions can be carried out sooner very often because they don't have the delays of people having to get to clinics and things. But I'm very concerned about it, actually. I can see both sides. But I don't think it's easy. As Calvin said, what about all the problems that might emerge? And I think it's a very emotive issue. I'm not totally against it. Basically, I would prefer that there were never any abortions. But, you know, we don't live in that sort of real world. And apparently very often it's the most desperate women, the people who are, you know, they might have been abused or they're living in difficult circumstances, who are the ones who are most likely to go to this. But exactly what happens if you're getting the pills for somebody else? I think it's got to be very strictly controlled.
But the amount of support that you get at the moment is fairly negligible. It is already very accessible. I understand that if you don't agree with abortion in the first place, this is a very difficult discussion to have because, of course, you're not going to want to make it easier for somebody to do something of which you do not approve. So I think in some ways we have to do it, for this conversation to work, we have to accept abortion is legal, abortion is part of healthcare in the UK, therefore within that remit, is this dangerous or is it safe? Now, I would absolutely say that you should ideally see a doctor before you have an abortion because it is better.
You must see a doctor, first. Surely.
But in the first 10 weeks, it is a very small amount of physical presence within your body. So going through it without it. I mean, that's an incredibly complicated philosophical debate. I mean, I am very heavily pregnant now. I have a baby inside me here.
I haven't noticed.
And I would not wish this on anybody who didn't want to do it. But I also understand the enormous complications that would come with not wanting to do this. I think the issue here is, if you cannot get hold of abortive measures, you are often likely to do something very dangerous to try and get rid of a pregnancy on your own. And that is the last thing that we want. This is safer than an actual DIY attempt.
Calvin, final word. How do you respond to that?
There's always a better way, and we have to make more options available to women that feel that this is their only way they can get out of a terrible situation, because it's not.
They must see a doctor first. You can't just ring up and ask for an abortion.
But also better contraception, better support, better options as early as possible, as late as necessary.
I do worry overall, not just specifically in regards to this issue, but I worry overall we're encouraging a health system now that never actually wants to see patients. I received a text message earlier today from my GP. Sorry, we're closed again for anything non-urgent. Well, what's non-urgent when it comes to
yes,
your
and if
health?
a woman wants to see a doctor about an abortion, then it is unforgivable.
Well,
she shouldn't be able
I
to.
think
Well, that is
if
urgent.
any of us want to see a doctor about anything, we should be able to. And I just worry that the health
totally
system
agree.
is moving completely away from
Yeah.
anything in person. And that is the fault of COVID lockdowns. Now, a new trailer for Top Gun's highly anticipated sequel has dropped, and apparently it's taken fans' breath away. So Tom Cruise returns as a more mature Maverick as he takes the son of his late co-pilot Goose, played by Miles Teller, under his wing. Here's a preview.
Everyone here is the best there is. Who the hell are they going to get to teach us?
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
We're going into combat on a level no living pilot's ever seen. Not even him.
You think up there you're dead. Believe me.
Now, if you feel like you've been hearing about this movie for years, you actually have. The film's original June 2020 release date was delayed because of COVID multiple times. Finally, it's going to hit cinemas on May the 27th this year. Any of you excited about the return of Top Gun?
Absolutely not. I've never seen any of them. I couldn't be.
I haven't.
I know it's a classic, but there are other classics I haven't seen. I won't. No, I'm not excited.
A ringing endorsement from Christine Hamilton. Cover up.
Sorry.
Take a read to stay tuned because my superstar panel will be back. In fact, coming up, we're asking, is it racist for white people to be outraged at Will Smith physically assaulting another black man at the Oscars? Our panel debate that lefty lunacy. Of course, it's come from The Guardian very shortly. But next, with Labour unable to answer if women can have a penis and the NHS asking if men could be pregnant, are we in real danger now of losing all concept of gender? Well, Darren Grimes tries to unravel this latest mess. He's here straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Darren Grimes is tonight's outsider. Another day, another Labour politician making a fool of themselves over basic biology.
You know what, this really upsets me because I think about a young person who's struggling at the moment, who's struggling with their identity. And when we're having a social media or a debate around whether what genitalia someone's got, I think it really debases the serious issues that people face.
That was Angela Rayner, a touted future leader of the No Opposition Party, being asked if a woman can have a penis. Same pathetic type of response from Keir Starmer the day earlier, but the bar is now so embarrassingly low among the Labour cohort that nothing surprises me with them anymore. Maybe they're getting their inspiration, though, from the equally as warped NHS trusts who are now asking men whether they're pregnant before carrying out X-rays and MRI scans. One trust in Liverpool said it was now policy that all patients under 60 would be asked if they had a baby inside them, regardless of how they may identify their gender. So has the NHS become totally consumed by wokery? And with top politicians left squirming and dazed when asked if women can have penises, are we hurtling fast towards a society totally ravaged by identity politics? Hell. Well, Darren Grimes has been investigating this. He joins me now. Darren, what's going on?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it? So Keir Starmer said it's not right to say only women have a cervix, right? I don't know about you, Dan, but I certainly don't have one. And then he was unable to say women only have penises. And now, of course, as you've just highlighted...
Only men have penises.
Only men have penises, yeah.
And he wasn't able to say that.
Asking that question, can a woman have a penis, to Angela Rayner? Absolutely. You'd think that you were asking her about some quantum theory or something, right? It was just completely...
Yeah. And I saw Emily Thornberry, another Labour frontbencher, earlier today, also struggled to answer. So, Darren, that's the Labour Party. We know they're a mess, but this NHS side of things is actually more concerning, isn't it? Because it's impacting male patients.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I am really quite concerned about all of this because you get a lot of people saying, well, Darren, you know, or Dan, this is just Westminster nonsense, right? No one cares about this sort of thing. But actually, they should care about this sort of thing because it starts to have knock-on consequences, right? I mean, the complete and utter bureaucratic madness that suggests that the guidelines, the government actually remove the word female from these guidelines. So now hospitals are, as you just said, asking people, men having x-rays before they might have cancer, right? They might be in there to find out, absolutely terrified that their life is going to be cut short by some form of cancer. Just picture that scene, right? And then you're asked the completely nonsensical, utterly bizarre question of whether or not you might be carrying a child. A biological impossibility, right? And we are denying fact and truth to those who need fact and truth the most, because they're actually they're putting their life in the NHS's hands.
Well, yes, and Darren, I read the testimony of the wife of a man suffering quite seriously with cancer, who said that he woke up from his medical procedure very confused and actually found it deeply unsettling, the NHS asking him as a man whether he was pregnant. So I guess you've got that impact on the patients. But surely the biggest issue here, Darren, is that it's the NHS denying biological reality. And that should worry us all.
Absolutely, yes. And truth and fact have gone completely out of the window. But I think actually the Angela Rayner case, right, trying to copy President Biden's Supreme Court nominee in her response, which is basically saying, I can't define a woman because she's not a biologist. Well, Dan, I'm not a lie detector, right? But I can tell that a politician who says they don't know who does and doesn't have a penis is telling their voters absolute fibs. And I think that it starts with the politicians, and it starts to feed through to, because they're lawmakers ultimately, let's not forget, it starts to feed through to healthcare providers, and actually the patients are the ones that suffer. These people aren't fit to run a bath, never mind the nation. So I want to actually hear about the inequalities that are being created, not just in healthcare, but I don't know if you saw the story, Dan, about Emily Bridges, who a month ago was winning medals in a male category for cycling and is now eligible to compete in the female-only category. So you've got healthcare, you've got the politician madness, the lawmaking madness, and now you've got women being completely removed from a level playing field in sport. And you just sort of think, how the hell have we got here?
Yeah, well, it's ripping through society, isn't it? It's ripping through society, and folk have to start standing up for women, but they also have to start standing up for biological reality. Darren Grimes, thank you so much. Coming up in Uncancelled on this very note, is a pandemic of wokeness the next big threat to society? Well, evolutionary psychologist Professor Gad Saad, he thinks so, and he'll join me soon. But next, in Media Buzz, Will Smith apologises to Chris Rock and fans in a highly PR-friendly statement after his vicious Oscars bitch slap. But will it be enough to rescue his reputation and career? My Superstar panel return to debate that straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media bus. Lots more front pages in now. The Independent reports that Russia is pledging to reduce attacks around Kiev in a bid to increase mutual trust in renewed negotiations. It's been hailed as a sign that the Ukraine peace talks might finally be progressing. Please God, we need a ceasefire. The Eye claims the PM is still in denial over Number 10 Partygate fines, alleging Boris Johnson doesn't accept he broke lockdown laws at Downing Street. The Prime Minister apparently hosted Conservative MPs tonight at a team-building dinner of chicken thighs and entertainment in a bid to shore up support ahead of the May local elections. The Guardian writes that Bojo is under renewed pressure after 20 fines for Partygate were issued today. And the paper reports that Moscow's vow to rein in its forces is clouded in suspicion after experts and Western diplomats warned the offer could just be a ploy to dress up Russian setbacks on the ground. The Daily Mirror highlights the Queen's tears for Philip as she bids a final farewell to her late husband at that service at Westminster Abbey. The paper also noted Prince Andrew, of course, worming his way back into the spotlight. The Queen of Broken Hearts is the Sun's headline. The paper focuses on Her Majesty's tears as she remembered her beloved Prince Philip, her husband of 73 years. And they've also said there, and she picks Andrew to escort her. My superstar panel back with me now, the media personality and writer Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. Now, in the wake of the bitch slap heard around the world, Will Smith finally issued an apology to comedian Chris Rock overnight after assaulting him during Sunday's Oscars for joking about wife Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, a result of her alopecia.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? that was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the out of me.
The Best Actor winner's Instagram statement should nab his PR team an award of their own. It's so precision-engineered to pacify, admitting his actions were unacceptable and inexcusable. It reads, "Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive. I would like to publicly apologise to you, Chris. I was out of line and I was wrong. I am embarrassed and my actions were not indicative of the man I want to be." Smith added that he regretted staining an otherwise gorgeous journey and branded himself a work in progress. But of course, it's a statement so at odds with that thuggery that we just witnessed, and also the fact that Smith didn't actually apologise to Chris Rock in his acceptance speech. So it begs the question, will anyone actually buy his Mr. Nice Guy act, or has the damage to his career and reputation already been done? Well, there is an encouraging sign for Smith, though, that the backlash to the backlash has already begun as well. So amid calls for the Fresh Prince star to give back his Oscar for playing Richard Williams, the tennis coach, father of Venus and Serena and King Richard, defenders pointed out that sex predator Harvey Weinstein and director Roman Polanski was convicted of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor were able to keep hold of their Oscars. Meanwhile, in The Guardian, of course, and I will admit this enraged me today, the US writer Teo Berrio spewed forth the ultimate piece of race-baiting nonsense with her take on the drama. She wrote, "There's something that feels precious at best and downright racist at worst about white people's reaction to the now infamous smack. it would seem that there's a layer of hyperviolence that's being projected onto Smith simply because he is a black man who was defending his black wife. While it's justifiable, important even, to interrogate his motives for delivering the slap, it's clear that the backlash against Smith is rooted in not just anti-blackness, but respectability politics as well. If only the memory eraser from Men in Black existed, I could forget ever reading that. Christine Hamilton, it just made me so angry because this is about one black man physically assaulting another black man. Race shouldn't come into it. Nothing I commented on this act had anything to do with the colour of either of these men's skin, apart from to say that if it had been a white actor taking a punch to Chris Rock, let's say Benedict Cumberbatch, for example, in the audience, he would have been cancelled. He would have been so quickly cancelled that we would never be talking about a Benedict Cumberbatch film again. That's where race matters here. But I'm sorry, to suggest that even commenting on this is somehow about anti-blackness or racism, what?
Well, as I never have ever seen a Top Gun film, it will not surprise you to know I have never seen a Will Smith film, and I have no idea.
What about The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the TV series?
No.
That's a good.
I know he's a great.
goodie.
I know he's. You know, there are other things to do than watching films and telly. I know he's a great actor. I know that he's been in line for. I know all that, but I have never ever so. To me, he was just an actor who was probably going to get the bauble. I didn't know who Chris Rock was. I had never heard of Jada Smith. I didn't understand the GI.
You live a nice life.
I do. I live a wonderful life.
It's a very calm life.
The whole thing passed me by.
But
what I saw was one man losing his temper and storming up to the stage and hitting another man. It was man on man. The fact that they were both black is incidental to me. So the idea that I'm a racist for calling Will Smith out, he can keep his bauble. Who cares whether he keeps the Oscar or not, for heaven's sake? But I think what he did was disgraceful. And I mean, supposing it had been Kenneth Branagh, never mind Cumberbatch, it's
it'd be finished.
Unbelievable what he did, and it's no good just calling it a slap and thinking it's okay. It was a hell of a hit.
And I mean, Calvin, it's grasping what The Guardian are trying to do in this comment piece. They refer back to John Wayne, who apparently in 1973 physically assaulted someone at the Oscars. 1973. I'm sorry, this was nothing to do with race. And don't you think it's dangerous, Calvin, if we start getting into this territory where we say a white person cannot comment on the actions of a black person?
Of course, that's all part of the game, isn't it?
It's where we're going, isn't it?
Exactly. If you weren't thinking down the terms of race, you were being a racist. It's bonkers. Let me just say, as a black person or as a mixed race person or as an ethnic minority person, whatever lefty tick box they want to say, I'm not above reproach. We are not above reproach. If we do something bad, just like everyone else, we should be punished for it. There should be consequences for it, for our actions. We should own our actions. Now, Will Smith did a bad thing. He marched upon stage and committed violence against another human being. That is a bad thing. In front of millions of people, he should have there and then apologised to Chris Rock and apologised to us. If he was in my class, I would have said, you know, you've let yourself down, you've let your class down, you've let me down. I really do. I grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was a hero of mine. I feel like he's let me down. He's let down a lot of people in his actions.
And look, more than anything, he let himself down. And by the way,
but to suggest that this is hyper-violence on him, us talking about him doing something wrong, that's not the violence.
Well, especially, I'm sorry, when he did it in front of tens of millions of people on a day that he knew the entire world was watching, the biggest moment of his career. And like you, Calvin, I say all of this, and I've been very critical over the past 24 hours, but I say it as a huge Will Smith fan. He's, you know, I've met all of these A-list actors, and most of them are horrible individuals, you know, really cretinous people. You know, Will Smith isn't, actually. Most people like him. He's very caring about the people around him, and I agree with all of that. But Rebecca Reed, I'm sorry, we can't go down a path where we start making excuses for criminal violence.
No, I think there are some times where being white does mean that you are better to listen than to talk. So, for instance, on the issue of there being more absentee fathers in certain communities than others, I have no useful contribution to make to that, whereas somebody like Sean Bailey has a fantastic insight. This, however, is not a race-specific issue.
Everyone's allowed an opinion about
you're
everything.
Allowed an opinion, but sometimes you're not the most helpful person. But this issue is not about race. This is about masculinity. masculinity. So actually, I'm fairly unqualified to comment on this because this is about what it is to be a man. And I think I'm much more interested to hear what men have to say about this because I think it is about male pride and ego and aggression.
Well, it's
so
also about privilege as well.
Yeah.
So Dan's article yesterday really struck me because because he's a celebrity, he got away with this. But also, perhaps this is black privilege because if Benedict Cumberbatch got up on stage and did that, he would be accused of racism.
Exactly.
And certainly if it was a bloke off the street who got up on the Oscars stage and punched Chris Rock, he would be in prison. He would be in prison. So there is a whole load of privilege. But Rebecca, I just can't agree with you, though. I think it's such a fundamental thing that you're saying, though, and I cannot agree with you
any time
that
as a white person we should probably listen rather than talk.
Well, I think everyone has a right to comment. If you come on this sofa, I don't care about your colour, I don't care about your sex, I don't care about your sexuality, I don't care about your gender. I'm putting all of the issues of the day in front of you, and I want to hear from all of you individually, regardless of your characteristics.
But there are some times that you would be much better able to comment on an issue as a man, and sometimes that I would be better able to comment as a woman. Sometimes
I just don't buy into it.
Sometimes the black.
I don't buy into that identity politics.
You have a more accurate lived experience. For instance, if a gay man is much better to talk about the issues specifically faced by gay men than I am, because I don't know. I'm not a gay man.
You're saying that the only people who can legitimately comment on Will Smith thumping Chris Rock are black men.
Sorry, if I've made
You're cutting out all women and all white.
If I've made it sound like that, that's not the intention. What I'm trying to say is everybody has
I just saw one man hitting another.
Everybody has the right to speak on it, but in terms of actual useful contribution to the conversation, I think probably men understand what happens.
No, and I understand what you're saying. I just
not white men or
fundamentally
black men,
disagree with it because I think this is where we're going as a society, Christine. We all exist in silos and we're only able to comment if we're in that silo. And I don't want to be in that path. I will comment on everything. I will comment on everything to do with everyone.
Society, we put too much weight on lived experiences. Lived experiences don't mean as much as we think they do.
No.
We can all have a view on capital punishment, whether we've murdered somebody or whatever.
True, that would affect everybody.
But can I just say, I think there's a bit of hypocrisy going on from you, because you criticised the Queen for supporting Prince Andrew. I'm sorry, not necessarily from you. You criticised the Queen for supporting Prince Andrew and saying he's my son and I want to show... I thought it was very touching, actually. I don't agree with what Prince Andrew's done, obviously. But Will Smith is being excused for defending his wife. Now, they're very similar.
All I would say on the Queen is I was very clear. I didn't criticise the Queen. In fact, I have been criticised today for defending her right to stand by her family. But I do disagree with her decision. But I disagree with her decision. I defend her right as a 95-year-old to have whoever she wants by her
I think I'm putting the words of some newspaper headline into you. I humbly apologise.
Yes, so because the
there is a hypocrisy going on about there.
The Daily Mirror said Andrew's worming his way back.
That's right.
Dan, can I just go back? So, if we're having a conversation about something that specifically affects one group more than another, do you not think the person with the...
No, I think that's so patronising.
Not that you shouldn't speak at all.
Because that happened on Question Time the other night, where someone, I think it was an Asian person who was on the panel and was very annoyed that Fiona Bruce had come to him first for the discussion.
Yes.
And so you can't get it right.
Can't win,
so I'm sorry.
you?
I think it would have been highly patronising if on every topic to do with race I say, well, Calvin is the only mixed race person here, so I'm going to hear from Calvin first. Rebecca is the only pregnant person here, so when we're talking about anything to do with pregnant... No, I don't play that game. Actually, I treat everyone equally and I want to hear from everyone equally on it, and I think everyone's opinion is valid, and I agree with Calvin. Lived experience, talk about it, sure, but it doesn't mean one person's opinion means more than another.
I think it means a little bit, because, for instance, if we're talking about Calvin, but if we're talking about having been a teacher, Calvin actually was a teacher. Calvin knows how schools work. Calvin knows what a classroom is.
Yeah,
I've
but let's
got
be
no
honest,
idea.
it doesn't... But Rebecca, it doesn't happen when you're talking about professions. It happens when you're talking about race and when you're talking about sexuality. And I'm not going to have, for example, given we're talking about this sofa, I'm not going to have on this sofa every night a trans person, a black person, an Asian person.
Well, why not, Dan? Try harder.
It's not big enough.
But these decisions affect that person, sure, as an individual, but they also affect us as a community and as a society. That's why That's why all of our say.
No, indeed.
This was just violence, one man against another, one person.
I want to go back to this lovely memorial service, though, quickly, because on an emotional day for the Queen and country, where we gave a proper send-off to one of the most enduring figures of the monarchy and Prince Philip. It was a joy today. I know we've spoken about the bad stuff, but it was a joy to see the future of the royal family take pride and place alongside their more senior relatives. I particularly love this moment, actually, between the Duchess of Cambridge and Princess Charlotte as the family entered Westminster Abbey for the service. According to lip readers, Kate reassured her only daughter, "You can smile," at which point she burst out into a broad grin. Peter Philip's daughters, Savannah and Isla, and Zara and Mike Tyndall's little one, Mia, just 3 of the Duke's 12 grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, right, were also in attendance. And as you'd expect, our future king, Prince George, was centre of attention, belting out hymns loud and proud as the royals celebrated a life well lived. I'm Rebecca Reed, Calvin Robinson, Christine Hamilton. Do stand by, because coming up, my superstar panel are going to nominate for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, but I get to choose the winner, of course, though. But first, is wokeness the real virus threatening society, having leaked from not a wet market, but anti-free speech college campuses? Well, Professor Gad Saad has written a book on this subject. He's here next. First, though, very quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, will justice be served over the horrific treatment of care home residents and their loved ones during the pandemic? Leandra Ashton, the ex-Coronation Street actress who was arrested for trying to liberate her gran, gives evidence to my lockdown inquiry in her first interview since launching a new care home watchdog. Plus, US broadcasting icon Megyn Kelly returns to break down the biggest stateside headlines, and Brendan O'Neill and Rod Liddle give their takes on the stories leading the news agenda. Plus, I'll be joined all night by my superstar panel. Celebrated political journalist John Sargent, activist and entrepreneur Adam Brooks, and royal and political commentator Daisy McAndrew. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Wokeism is running rampant on university campuses as free speech is willingly sacrificed to protect people's feelings. We were all convinced that it was a virus that only infected our snowflake students, right, to begin with. But now, this pandemic of the mind spreading across the globe, faster than COVID-19, and I think we need to take it seriously. That's also the view of evolutionary psychologist Professor Gad Saad, whose book, The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, rails against the so-called social justice warriors of the world. In the book, Professor Saad discusses what he calls wokeism's parasitic idea pathogens, like militant feminism, identity politics, diversity, equity and inclusion. Professor Saad was born into a Jewish family in Lebanon, but they fled the civil war to Canada in 1975. He says his experiences as a child are a big reason why he can't stay silent about this cultural phenomenon that's threatening the West's freedom of speech. And I'm delighted to say Professor Saad joins me now. Professor, great to have you here. So, we thought to begin with, didn't we? Oh, this will just stay in universities. We don't need to worry. But now it's in our health system, it's in our government, it's in our shops, it's in our corporations. It really has spread like a virus.
Well, thank you for having me. And first, I should say that I'm upset at Calvin because he's borrowed 2 elements of my sartorial look. Number 1, bow ties, number 2, suits. So he owes me royalties. In any case, I do agree that many people have the reflex to think, you know, why are you worrying about all of these woke ideas? They're just restricted to some esoteric department in the humanities. That's typically the reaction that I would get for the 25 plus years that I've been warning people. And as you correctly pointed out, these parasites, these parasitic ideas, just like the COVID virus, as far as we know, broke out of a lab, the bad ideas start off in some esoteric department, but then they become our prime minister, Justin Trudeau. He is a walking manifestation of every idea pathogen that I cover in the book. So yes, it starts off within the rarefied world of the ivory tower, but eventually it goes into every nook and cranny of society.
And you've also linked your ideas to what happened yesterday Professor, at the Oscars. You say, think of the millions of people who every day go to work with dignity and grace, from the garbage man to the surgeon to the teacher to the cop to the retail clerk. Now think about the Hollywood parasites, self-absorbed, narcissistic, entitled, shallow pigs.
I was trying to be diplomatic, and that's exactly what they are. I can't stand how narcissistic they are. I can't stand how entitled they are. I wrote an article more than 10 years ago in Psychology Today where that was titled "The Narcissism and Grandiosity of Celebrities." And one of the arguments that I use to explain why they are the way that they are is I analogize it to survival guilt. You know, when a plane crashes and someone survives and another person dies, you're shackled by the guilt of why did I survive whereas someone else didn't. Well, I argue that Hollywood types suffer from existential guilt. They know in the deep recesses of their mind that they are frauds, that they are not worthy of all the adulation. I mean, you shouldn't be treated as though you are curing cancer simply because you pretend to be someone who cures cancer. And so the way that they resolve that existential guilt is that they pretend that they are solving world hunger and they are solving climate change, because then that allows them to argue, I am worthy of all this adulation. It's grotesque. I can't stand them, and we should be honoring our nurses and our bus drivers more than we do these buffoons.
Now, you also write that a lot of this comes down to attempts to shut down free speech, largely to try and protect people's feelings. That, you think, is a slippery slope that becomes an abyss of infinite lunacy. So how do we stand up for free speech when you know how cancel culture is just out there in every part of society now?
Look, I'm not asking people to be reckless martyrs. I understand that each person has to calculate the trade-offs, the pros and cons of what they can say given their own unique realities. But the best way to analogize this is when the young men landed on the Normandy beaches, they weren't guaranteed safe passage from the Germans. Most of them knew that they were going to be mowed down like little mosquitoes, and yet they signed up and said, I'm willing to do it. Well, I understand that speaking out might get you fired or might get you canceled from the cool kids parties. We all have a cost to bear. So you can modulate how much cost you're willing to tolerate. But what you can't do is simply say, I'm not willing to tolerate any risk in my life. I'm not willing to challenge my friends on Facebook because they'll unfriend me, or they won't think I'm cool, or they won't invite me to the next party. So we can each decide how much contribution to the battle of ideas we're willing to partake in. But what we certainly can't do is diffuse all of the responsibility on a few courageous others. So that's why I tell people, activate your inner honey badger. And the reason why I use the honey badger as the model is because the honey badger is the size of a small dog, and yet it is so fierce and ferocious that it could withstand an attack of 6 adult lions. You can go on YouTube and see some of those clips. And so I ask people, I implore people to exhibit that kind of ideological courage. If you have a set of positions that you can defend and articulate properly on first principles, then find your spine, grow a pair, and speak out. Otherwise, you'll wake up one day and say, hey, where have all my freedoms gone? And believe me, as someone who escaped the Middle East, that realization can come to you from one day to the next. So speak out, stop being a coward.
Professor, you're a great man. Great advice. That was the evolutionary behavioural scientist and the author of the brilliant book, The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, Professor Gad Saad. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Briton and Union jackass. My superstar panel back with me, Christine Hamilton. Who's your nominee for Greatest Briton?
It's the fabulous Duke of Edinburgh. This is the day to remember him and all the wonderful work he did. So he is my greatest Briton.
Rebecca Reed, your nominee.
I've gone for Anisha Ansari, who was the other person who was also with Nazanin in Iran, who has been very quietly dignified and hasn't had quite the same level of lauding since getting home that Nazanin has, but is a very wise and dignified man.
And Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
Kenneth Branagh for winning an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for his film Belfast.
I was so happy about this. He is my winner too. Today's Greatest Britain. Congratulations to Kenneth Branagh. His victory obviously completely overshadowed yesterday. But Belfast is one of the only Oscar films that was actually worthy of being promoted on a great stage, because it's positive, it's for the whole family, and I really recommend people watch Belfast. Congratulations to Kenneth Branagh. Uni and Jackass time, Christine, your nominee?
Well, there were so many the possibilities today. Keir Starmer, who doesn't even know whether a woman should or shouldn't have a penis, but also the NHS trusts, who are now asking men when they go for a scan or an X-ray whether they're pregnant, because they have a form now. They can't say women, you have to say individual. This whole wokery, gender-bending bollocks, that's what I want to nominate.
She's on one. Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
All the Tory MPs who are backing home abortions because life is precious. Let's not make it easier to end it.
And Rebecca Reid, your Uni and Jackass nominee.
Prince Harry, because why on earth wasn't he at the memorial today? It would have been a very simple, very powerful gesture to turn up. So I think really that was his responsibility, and I'm disappointed in both of them, but especially Harry.
Oh my goodness, I'm with you. I'm with you. All good nominees, but I'm going with Rebecca Reid for Harry and Meghan, because it is a disgrace that this couple didn't show up to Prince Philip's memorial because they're having a pathetic row with the British government over security. Shame on them. And imagine how disappointed the Queen must have been. But look, one last thing before we go today. As she mentioned earlier tonight, and I'm going to embarrass you because you've kept it secret for such a long time, but Rebecca Reid, our superstar panellist, is going to be heading off for a little while, because, Rebecca, you're having a baby, and we're so excited for you. You kept the secret a long time. I know you've wanted a baby your entire life, so this means everything to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm slightly realising what I've got myself into, but it's too late to turn back now, so let's hope it's a nice, sleepy baby. And yeah, I'll be back in a few weeks, and I'm very, very appreciative of how kind and understanding and flexible everybody at GBNews has been. I really do appreciate it.
Well, we're going to miss you. Tuesday nights aren't going to be the same. Who's going to fill your lefty void, Rebecca Reid?
I will keep a list of everything that's offended me and all the ways that maternity leave is unfair on women, and I'll come and read it to you when I'm back.
But yes, we're hoping that you're back very soon. But of course, take all the time you need, and good luck. And let us know when the baby arrives, Rebecca, so that we can announce your news to all of our GB News family. Thank you so much to Calvin Robinson and Christine Hamilton tonight as well. What a great superstar panel, and it has been feisty. I'll be back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headliners is up next, though. Hope you have an absolutely brilliant day, and thank you so much for your company tonight. Good night.
Hello again. This time last week it was all about blue skies and soaring temperatures, but the next few days are going to offer a big contrast. It is turning much colder, with ice in places and even some snow. Here's the reason why this cold front is drifting southwards. It wiggles around a little bit, and that could provide a bit of snow, particularly during tomorrow evening. But it introduces the cold air everywhere by Thursday. Back to tonight, and the cold air is moving in across the northeast of Scotland, and with the snow showers here, that could cause a bit of disruption, ice and snow risk, so we do have a yellow warning in place. Rain spreading into parts of northern England and Northern Ireland. Behind that, the colder air, so a frost. It'll be a relatively mild night across the south. Temperatures about average as we start Wednesday here. And a dry, bright day for parts of the southwest, certainly a brighter day compared to